Okay, so today I'm going to be speaking about the Islamic Golden Age. And this is a history that a lot of Muslims don't know, and I didn't know it until recently. So, this time period is between the 8th to the 13th century, and this is during the Abbasid Caliphate. And the Golden Age is regarded as the 22 years where Harun al Rashid was the Khalifa, so he was the leader of the Muslims. So today I'm going to speak a bit about sciences and how the development of sciences happened, and how the Muslims contributed, and how the world was involved, and how the spread of knowledge happened. So I'm going to be talking about sciences. That's going to be including mathematics. So the first thing that I want to speak about is the development of knowledge. In the Middle Ages, during this time, most of the works were in Greek, which is what we were taught. It was the Western world. But that's not the complete truth. The complete truth is that about half of these works were also in Arabic. And then there were sub branches of that. There was Latin, there was Greek, English, Babylonian, Indian. So there was so these roots, they come from a lot of different countries, but the West likes to attribute all of the developments that I learnt about in school in science and mathematics to the Greeks, because Greeks were half of the most prominent workers and scientists. So they kind of, when I was taught, I was never taught about Islamic history. So the West kind of fails to recognize it was a combined effort of scholars all around the world, including the Muslims in Persia, Taoism in China, and Hindus in India. So today I'm going to be going through a few of these developments. The first topic that I want to talk about is astronomy. So the ancient Greeks used to believe that planets were heavenly bodies, and they were swimming, and they soon, after some development, they started to use a spherical Earth model. So a scientist named Ptolemy challenged this idea, proposing where all the planets were circulating the Earth, and this was called geocentrism, where Earth was at the center of this model and all the planets were around it, orbiting it. Now, these works were translated and then further developed by Ibn al-Shatir, a scientist in Syria, Damascus, and it parallels the next development by Copernicus. He was a Polish scientist around the same time. And then the next development was heliocentrism, and this is a similar form of what we use today, where the Earth actually orbits the Sun, and it places the Sun at the center of the model instead of Earth. So now obviously we know that we all orbit the Sun. So the point is that these developments happen through from all around the world, the Greeks to the Muslims to a French scientist. So that's the point that I want to make here. And also, if you want to learn a bit more about these models and the development, epistemology, the theory of knowledge, I would suggest watching an anime called Orb. I've actually made a video about that. So the next science that I want to talk about is maths. Math is a very big topic during the Islamic Golden Age. I'm going to give an example. Al-Khwarizmi, he was a Persian. He is known as the father of algebra by the whole world. Why? What did he do? He actually introduced the use of x as an unknown, and we all learned that in our high school / GCSE times. So whenever my students ask why do we have to learn this, I always try and tell them that a Muslim actually came up with the idea of unknown. So that's quite interesting. One thing that I do want to say is that the etymology, so the origin of algorithm, actually comes from his name, and algebra. So algebra comes from the Arabic word al-jabr. And finally, in terms of mathematics, I want to talk about trigonometry. Trigonometry is a very big one in terms of the Muslims. So the Greeks actually used to use lines inside of a circle, which we learned in GCSE were called chords. This is what the Greeks used to use. So they never actually had the idea of sine and cosine until the Muslims introduced it into the mathematical world. So that was a pretty big one, which I never knew about. The next thing that I want to talk about is the development of numbers. So the development of numbers actually started from India, and then it went to Eastern Arabic, and then Western Arabic, and then modern numbers. And numbers are really important in Islam. Fractions are mentioned in the Quran in Surah Nisa. The six fractions mentioned in the Quran, and they're all regarding inheritance, which shows how big of a topic inheritance is and how important it is. Astronomy was also very renowned because of the Qibla direction. So they had to calculate the Qibla from anywhere in the world in terms of longitude and latitude. And one thing that a lot of people don't actually know is that there is a big relationship between maths and music. That's because you can always look at music in a mathematical sense, and also poetry was a huge thing for the Arabs, and it still is to this day. It's something that's always been in their culture, which is why the Quran was sent in Arabic. Part of it was a challenge to the Arabs, and that's what happens. It always comes down as a challenge to the people. In terms of Isa alayhi salam, he used to be able to perform miracles, and at this time, there was in the time where he lived in, it was the strongest time for science and medical developments, and then he came and he challenged that, showing that he really received the gift from Allah and the ability to do that. Same with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the final prophet. He was in Arabia and the Quran was sent down, and this was obviously a challenge to the Arabs, in terms of, even from a poetry standpoint and from a balagha standpoint, the eloquence of language. This is what the Quran does, and this is what Allah does. But anyway, coming back to science, I want to speak a bit about physicians. So let's just talk about a few developments in science. First of all, one big name is Ibn Rushd. He was a great Muslim philosopher. He was the author of the Muqaddimah, which I've referenced before. Ibn al-Nafis. He spoke about the heart and the lungs, and the circulation of blood between the heart and the lungs. And the funny thing is that a lot of his work was actually ignored from the 13th century, and then it was rediscovered in the 20th century. So he was studying the heart and the pumping of the blood around the body, and only in the 17th century, William Harvey's scholarly experiments finally revealed that the blood's greater or complete circulation. But this was already discovered by the Muslim scientists. And then finally, I want to speak about medicine, hospitals, and a bit of chemistry. A big name that I want to mention is Ibn Sina, and in the West he's known as Avicenna. This is because the West likes to Greek wash names, make them all sound Greek. I think what they done to Ibn Rushd, they call him Averroes, so that's his English name. Same with Ibn Sina, he's known as Avicenna. So during the Islamic Golden Age, he wrote an encyclopedia called Al-Qanun, the Canon, and he took all the Greek medical knowledge with Arabic interpretations, and he spread it out into 5 books, and he spoke about anatomy, diseases, hygiene, purges, and disorders of the arms and the legs. So I just want to explain that there were big developments in medicine during the Islamic Golden Age, which a lot of people don't know. Finally, I want to speak a bit about hospitals. So hospitals is a very big one. Hospitals, as we know today, were first developed in the Islamic lands. So in terms of segregation, the Muslims brought that in terms of separate wards for specific diseases, in terms of eyes, body parts, muscles. This was all brought in by the Muslims. And one really interesting thing was that a lot of this, ethics-wise, was brought in by the Muslims too. So one of the first Arabic texts to treat the subject of ethics was Al-Ruhaywi's Adab al-Tabib. So this is called the physician's code of ethics. And some examples of that is that the doctor is taught to walk and talk and to be modest, to avoid money grubbing, to avoid slander, addiction to drugs, to avoid losing his temper, and to answer patiently when asked questions by the patient or the patient's family. And also, hospitals were free in this time, which a lot of people don't know. And also, if a client requested a second opinion, and the second opinion should counter to the doctor's own opinion, he was expected to explain both points of view to the patient, which is something that we don't even find today, to be honest. Finding about points of views from different sides, a lot of the time it's just one size fits all in the hospital. Okay, now the last thing that I want to speak about is chemistry. Back in the day, in the Middle Ages, this was actually called alchemy. The reason why is because all of these separate sciences, they used to fall under one roof. Now, what is the point of alchemy? Why isn't it found today? First of all, alchemy has turned to chemistry. Why? Because it's more of a science-focused thing. Alchemy, it's like a canopy in it, and it takes over a lot of sciences. Now, I'll give an example. Now, the whole point of alchemy is to turn lead into gold, which of course we know that can never happen. But this was what people were studying back in the day, in the Middle Ages. So alchemy has aspects of spirituality and astrology. And there's also aspects of numerology. So you can see how it brings all these different, well, part of it's sciences and part of it is the occult. The occult basically means jinns, in terms of numerology wise. Now, the next thing that I want to say is that from an Islamic standpoint, alchemy has no basis, and it would just be chemistry in modern times. And I do want to say that in terms of alchemy, something that a lot of people already know, but the Philosopher's Stone is a alchemical substance able to turn lead into gold and grant immortality. This, now, why did I mention that? It's because I wanted to say that this is known as the elixir. And where does the elixir come from? What is its etymology? It's actually al-iksir in Arabic. So yeah, those were a few developments that I wanted to mention from the book. I'll put it up on the screen. And yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something.